So this is going to be my first demo video ever, so apologies in advance for the newbiness of it. What I've done here is quickly coiled up what I'm imagining as a facsimile cache of your jar and lid top. And I want to demonstrate a couple different things. One is, how would I cut a level line in order to separate out what is the shoulder of this jar, the theoretical jar, and what is going to be the cap lid for it. So I'm going to pause and get set up to do that. So something I like to do when I need to establish a good straight line is use my wire. This is not going to be perfect. Let me see if I can get it in the shot here. But it is going to be better than if I were to just try to eyeball the line. So there's my wire, there's my toggles dangling down. I don't mean to be making you seasick, I'm sorry. So I'm just going to make an impression with the wire. I'm not trying to cut with the wire, I'm just trying to leave a light line that's going to be my guide. And then I'm trying to... So the lighting is less than ideal, but I think you can see that faintly traced line. You can also see it's not perfectly level. But that is going to give me a guide when I go to cut with my knife to make this cut. Alright, I'm going to give this a whirl. I have been trying to work with a limited number of tools so far. I got this done with a metal rib, wood bevel tool, fettling knife, but it dawned on me that you might have more tools in this, and therefore I'm going to give myself the luxury of working with an X-Acto. So if you have a clay X-Acto, that triangular blade that's on what is called a cleanup tool, or an honest to goodness X-Acto, I recommend using that now. You can always do a fettling knife. You're just going to have to spend a little time loving on the thing when you're done, getting it a little bit back on round because of the extra drag that this blade creates. So I'm going to come in here with a X-Acto. You can see that I took a little time to center this up. I'm also using the sunshine cob approach. I've never done this before, where I actually fastened the coil to the bat and trapped air here so that I could really rib that and get it as curvy as I wanted. Okay, so what angle do I want to cut at? I could take advantage of the kind of the jack-o'-lantern technique, where if I actually came in and cut at an angle, there's already going to be a little resistance to the lid just sliding off. And I can only think of two reasons not to come at an angle. One is that it would create sharper edges which break, so I would have to dress those edges in some way if I did that. And the other is just the convention of the two level surfaces sliding on each other or meeting each other that I'm accustomed to. And I'm finding that convention so strong that right now that's what I'm going to go for. So I need to, whether I'm doing more of a jack-o'-lantern cut or the conventional cut I'm talking about, I need to be mindful of keeping my blade level and parallel to the bat as I cut. So I'm going to just let my hand, I don't know if you can see that, I'm just going to let it ride along the bat for steadiness and introduce the blade. And because the clay is nice and stuck on, this is easy to do while turning the bat. It would be tougher to do if my piece wasn't secured. In that case, I would actually be turning the piece and kind of pushing down on the bat with the bottom of the piece to keep it turning. So I'm just going to do a couple turns to make sure I got this. I am generalizing where the horizontal line is here because my wire did vary a little. So hopefully this will be close. I can pull this off. And we can see that I did not finish the coils on the inside. All right, I'm going to pause and prep the next part. This is where I was talking about how to get the inside flange on the lid to line up nicely with the body of the piece where it's going to fit the jar. Okay, before I jump in too far, what do we know about lids? We know that we want the lid to work with the silhouette of the piece. We don't want a sudden break in the flow of the line of the silhouette unless we've designed that in. We know that's true. We also know that we want the lid to fit the piece in terms of how the flange or any other device you're using to secure the lid and keep it from sliding off. We know that we want that to be like hand in glove. We just want it to whisper in there and feel secure. And in fact, when we make lids where there is a flange but the whole thing kind of rolls around, there's a sense of incompleteness to the piece anytime you physically engage with the work. So we know we want it to fit really nicely, and that's why I wanted to go into this next technique. So, I'm not sure I made this clear. I did not try to reproduce cast your entire tall jar. I'm just trying to reproduce from the bottom up. And for this next portion, what I'm imagining is that the upper part of your jar, when you're ready to work on the lid, will still be, it'll be a little stiff, but it'll still be on the soft side. I'm going to wire this off here now. Let's see if that mangles it or not. So I'm imagining you actually making a cut on your jar that you've already coil built and just taking this upper section in order to create the flange and then going back and rejoining that. So that did beat that up a little bit. You will not have that issue if you're cutting off of clay underneath and not wiring off of a plastic bag. All right, so here is the deal. I'm going to set this to one side. So I know, obviously, here's my cut edge, that I need that flange to start here and come straight down. But it's easy while working for there to be some variation in the wall of the flange, and I go to fit it and it suddenly doesn't work. So instead what I do is I create the flange by laying it initially directly inside the area that it's going to have to fit snugly into to begin with. So first I'll establish the size of my coil for that. And then I know I'm in the ballpark. My coil is not quite cooperating. Let me just tack it in place. I'm not joining it right now because I want a nice even join. But let me just tack it together and make sure my measurements are good. And I don't know if you can see that, but that's the idea. If this is my outside measurement, then I know that it's just going to slide right into the body of my pot and work well. So the next thing is to just get this coil joined so it thinks it's all one piece. And then I can look at scoring and slipping and joining it to the underside of the lid. And I'm going to work it from there. I'm actually looking for more of a thinned out collar so that this flange feels more analogous to the wall of the jar. All right, I scored and slipped the bottom of this guy and the inside edge of this guy. Really, I only need to score and slip the one outer edge of this, because that's where it's going to join in there. But before I join it, I want to start to extend this. So I'm just going to very mindfully, let me get the visual obstacles out of the way, pinch this, and I'm just taking my time because I don't want the clay to go outwards. I don't want it to expand the diameter of this flange. I want the clay to come up and create a thinner wall. So I'm making a taper where the bottom is a little thicker. That's where it's going to join into the cap lid. But I can also take, this is the top of the jar, I can also take this and go back and check it. And sure enough, just with that little bit of pinching, it still wants to fit, but it doesn't just slide on. So I know I need to come in. I'm going to make an adjustment here and move this more centrally so it doesn't, so it's not such an odd visual thing. There we go. I'm now going to go in and do a round of pinching where what I'm really doing is encouraging the entire flange to tilt inwards. If I wanted this to be a longer flange, more of a longer sleeve going into the body of the jar, which is, you'll see longer sleeves on a teapot lid, because then as you tilt the teapot, there's more of the flange to catch, and there's a greater likelihood you can keep the lid from tilting in. But there's also, there's like an emotional element to how this flange is shaped. It feels different if you have a very deep flange or if you just have a minimal flange to make it catch and prevent the lid just sliding horizontally off the jar. That's your call. And it's yet another feel if the entire flange isn't a flange, in fact, it's a volume. Let's say this came up and came to a point almost like the bottom of an acorn. That gives a sense of compression on the inside space as you put the lid down, which yields an entirely different emotional impact. It doesn't affect the function per se. It's purely an aesthetic thing. All right, so I encourage that to tilt inwards, and the fit is better, but it is still a little bit large. So I will just keep going back and forth between working this to narrow that diameter and keep it even, and checking it with the top of my jar until I have something that slides in.